What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
No disclaimer nowadays. So I warn you right away, if you have no experience, now is the time to go outside to your car and try to at least find where these plugs stand. There were, of course, wonderful times when the wires from the timing cover went straight to the plugs, which were also in plain sight. Now some things have changed, so before you can swap those plugs in 5 minutes, you need to make sure you don't have to remove the intake manifold, for example. This isn't always easy, so it's advisable to watch the professionals do it first. Sometimes it is difficult to properly remove the individual ignition coil, which stands directly on the plug, and there may also be difficulties for those who want to change the plugs on a V8 engine or, say, an opposite. Some plugs stand so far away and inconveniently that to get to them is a fun thing to do. What do you need? Let me say a few words about the tools. It is clear that nothing can be done without a spark plug wrench. Whether it will be hinged, tubular or whatever, it doesn't matter, it's a matter of taste. And it is not so important how it will hold the candle, a rubber ring, a magnet or a spring. The main thing is to choose the right size, because the keys are different, 14mm, 16mm, the most common, 18 or 21mm. And you can accidentally buy a 22mm wrench, which can be used to unscrew the plugs on, for example, ZIS-5, but not on the Rapid. So you need the right wrench, not the first one you come across. The second thing is a clean rag, and even better, a can of compressed air. Just these things are usually not used, and in vain. Further, everything depends on how the process will go. You may need WD-40 and, God forbid, an extractor. In order not to bring the situation to the extreme, to the extractor, it is enough to adhere to the following rules. Carefully one by one. The first thing, it is desirable to wait for the motor to cool down. In general, this is the rule, but I once had a car in which to unscrew the plugs on cold was very difficult, ordinary Nexia with a nasty motor G15MF, but on a hot engine, easily. But that was a Nexia, and we are talking about normal cars. So, the engine has cooled down. Next, it is very important to remove as much dirt as possible, which should not get into the plug wells and from there into the combustion chambers. Therefore, take a rag and wipe everything that is located in the immediate vicinity of the plugs. Of course, it would be ideal to bring the spark plug wells themselves to the no-fly set their condition, but it is usually impossible to get into them with a rag. Here compressed air will help. I don't think you will have a compressor at hand, so it is desirable to blow out the wells at least with air from a can. Of course, it is impossible to achieve perfect cleanliness with it, but it will blow away what would have flown inside the engine in the first place. The children's rule, a little bit does not count for the engine, and garbage does not work at all. Even a little bit of dust that got into the combustion chamber will greatly reduce the life of the engine. And it's a pity that many people forget about this. After the relative order is put in order, you can remove the high-voltage wires. If there is little experience, it is better to remove them one by one, otherwise you can confuse their sequence. Do not pull the wire itself, it is much better to remove it by the spark plug. After the wire is removed from the spark plug with a slight pop, the latter can be unscrewed. There are only two possibilities, either the plug is unscrewed or it is not. In the first case everything is fine, in the second, theoretically, of course, you can pour a little Vodka on a cold engine and see what happens. It rarely helps, but it may help. If the plug persistently does not move, it is better to stop the experiment and go to the service. Otherwise, you can break the plug, and then without an extractor to pull out its remains will be very difficult. Let professionals do it. When installing a new plug, you need to be even more careful. In some engines the spark plug wells are so deep that it is impossible to insert the plug by hand, and it has to be inserted into the wrench, and it has to go into the well. It is important to get the plug into the hole, and not to hit the bottom of the well with the side electrode. Firstly, in such deep wells there is likely to be debris, which is successfully raked into the combustion chamber by this candle. And secondly, striking with the electrode changes the gap. This, of course, is also bad. Therefore, it is better to act carefully and do not hurry. With what force to tighten the candle? This is a philosophical, religious, and even a little rhetorical question. Usually everyone just pulls by hand and there how it will tighten. In fact, all manufacturers specify the exact tightening torque. Usually it does not exceed 25 Newton meters, but you can find out exactly this information from the recommendations of the plug manufacturer. It's a pity that almost no one does this. Moreover, many do not believe that the wrong torque can somehow seriously damage. In fact, it is capable of doing so. If the plug is not torqued, it will overheat. It sounds strange, but it is a fact. The heat output will be hindered due to incomplete adhesion of the deformable metal washer. Hence caliber ignition and failure of the plug itself and the high-voltage wire, or rather, its tip. In the worst case, the plug can even shoot out of the block. If the plug is over-tightened, the plug housing can be pulled out, which leads to gas bursting between the housing and the insulator. In general, nothing good either. Therefore, it is very important to remember, without observing the tightening torque, it is impossible to guarantee the correct operation of the plug. What to do if you don't have a torque wrench at hand? The main thing is not to despair. Candle manufacturers know that no one tightens these candles with such a wrench, so they almost always draw pictures on the packages. Usually they show a candle and say something like 1/2 or 3/4. This means that after tightening the candle by hand, it must be turned with a wrench for another half turn, 180 degrees, or 3/4, 270 degrees. In this case, the tightening torque will be selected correctly. But only if at least 3 conditions are met. The first is the initial tightening by hand. In general, it is undesirable to screw in the candle with a wrench. You can mess something up and drive it not on the thread. A foolish but strong man will tear the thread easily. That's why candles are always screwed in by hand and only tightened with a wrench. That is why, by the way, the thread must be clean. It is clear that by hand is not necessarily with fingers. You can also use a pipe wrench if the depth of the well does not allow you to do it by hand, but without any levers and collars. The second is the presence of lubricant. Plug manufacturers usually do not recommend lubricating the plug threads. Pay attention to this. If you use lubricant when the manufacturer does not recommend it, the tightening torque will be higher than recommended. And this, as I have already said, is bad. Therefore, those who like to lubricate the threads for proper tightening, it is better to focus on the number of revolutions after screwing in the plug, rather than on the torque wrench. Third, recommendations of 1, 2, or 3, 4 turn work only for new plugs. In this case, the deformation of the sealing washer of the plug is taken into account, which is significantly compressed and is, by and large, disposable. If you screw in a plug with an already deformed washer, i.e. repeatedly, there is no need to pull another half turn, there is nothing to compress, and you will get a noticeable over-tightening. Here it is better to do the opposite, focus on the torque wrench, not on the number of revolutions drawn on the candle package. Finally, the last question remains, is it necessary to lubricate the wire or coil lugs which are put on the plugs? There is no unambiguous answer here. But we can say for sure, it is better not to grease anything than to grease with some silicone, which can glue the coil to the plug. Insulate very well, or to fill everything with conductive graphite, where the result can be unpredictable. But you can use some fluoroplastic or Teflon grease, it will not be worse. In conclusion, while the desire to change spark plugs may seem straightforward, the reality is often more complex. From understanding the specific requirements of your vehicle to having the right tools and techniques, there are several factors that can complicate the process. It's essential to approach this task with careful consideration and preparation. Whether you choose to tackle it yourself or seek professional help, being informed will ensure that your engine runs smoothly and efficiently. Remember, wanting to change spark plugs is just the first step. Knowing how to do it properly is what truly matters. Thank you for watching, and we hope this video has provided valuable insights into the intricacies of spark plug replacement.